and welcome to the Balancing Act. I'm your host, Sarah Sheridan, Director of Sales and Recruiting at Hirewell and mom to three little ones. For today's episode, I am super excited to welcome our guest, Susan Scutt, PE Operating Partner and mom to two girls. Susan, welcome.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
Yes, after some minor tech issues, we have arrived.
I've confirmed I'm tech illiterate with all the new gadgets that are out there.
I'm right there with you. Awesome. Well, let's kick things off. I'd love to start things off if you can tell us a little bit more about your career journey and maybe highlight some key steps that led you to your current position.
Certainly. Well, I started my career so long ago, back in the Stone Ages, but I actually did coding back then,
Oh my
C on
gosh.
Unix, for those of you in the tech world. But I did that for about 4 years, and then I did business consulting. And then I had my first daughter and decided to take some time off. So I took 6 years off, all in supporting the two girls and getting them to an age where I felt ready to go back to work, and then jumped into kind of a supply chain consultant role at Dell. Spent about 7.5 years at Dell, just kind of as a fix-it person. Honestly, I came in and fixed a broken operation, and they're like, okay, now it's time to go fix this area or stand up this new function, which was really fun. But I got bit by the private equity bug about almost 12 years ago and ended up taking a role where I led the transformation. I was hired to lead the transformation of a portfolio company of a very prominent private equity firm, and have not turned away since. I led that transformation, the staff to the CEO at the time, then went to work at that private equity firm for about 3.5 years. And then since then went and stood up portfolio operations at another firm. And, finally I'm at a fourth firm, continuing to do the operational side of private equity, working with executives and companies and working to transform companies and just make them more efficient and effective.
Love it. Well, I know it's always hard to condense your entire life into a 2-minute spiel, but that was very helpful.
It's funny, I do turn to those first two experiences as really laying the foundation for what I do now, because coding is really taking a big opportunity and breaking it into bite-sized chunks, or opportunity or problem, and breaking it into bite-sized chunks and solving for it with code. And then the business consulting side is doing the same thing, but solving for it with people, process, systems. And it's kind of still what I do now. And it's, kind of what I have in my DNA to go do probably until I retire.
Oh, love it. And now let's switch over to family life. I know you've got two daughters. Can you tell me a little bit more about just ages, names?
Certainly. So my older daughter is, oh my goodness, 25. That makes me really old. Is doing her thing within the business world, and very proud of her in that regard. And then my younger daughter graduated from undergrad a year ago, and she just applied to med school, or many med schools. So we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed and looking to see where she gets accepted. But so yeah, certainly have seen and experience kind of the work-life balance, or as we call it, but there is really no balance.
Yeah.
It's kind of work-life integration over the years.
Yeah.
And then I did get remarried a couple years ago, or 3 years actually this week. And I have two stepsons, and very proud of them, also in their 20s and, figuring out life.
Oh, amazing. Well, and then kind of thinking over your career choices throughout your career, how would you say your decisions have really been influenced by, your daughter's needs, stages of life, and then any particularly tough career decision you had to make in order to really prioritize your family?
Certainly. Well, my first decision that was due to my children was deciding to stop working.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was just on a personal level. I had a very tough pregnancy and kind of, had a little bit of a wake-up call on what's important in life. And so I did decide to take some time off. I'll say my kids look back in the 6 years that I took off, they're like, how did you not go crazy? Because I am definitely not a typical stay-at-home mom. I'm not sure how I did not go crazy in those 6 years, but certainly I look back and I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity to spend with them. But, a lot of people don't have that opportunity. And But I was itching to go back for a while. And when I finally did, I will say that was another tough decision because it, not only on the kid front, but I mean, having not done anything work wise for 6 years, it was tough going back and kind of getting back into that routine, as well as just, finding a job that doesn't look at, well, what have you done for 6 years and hold that against you. And luckily, Dell didn't do that and took me with open arms. So I'm very, very grateful for that. But I think in both cases, leaving the workforce, getting back into the workforce, big, big moves.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will say, I made a decision very consciously to, in some cases, not go for that promotion or not go for that next step. Because truth be told, not only was I a working mom, but I was a working single mom. And so for a good chunk of their youth, I had to make sure that I had the flexibility that, again, certain careers, certain roles don't afford you. And so, yeah, I think as women, in some cases, and I mean, as just parents, you have to sometimes kind of weigh the pros and cons. And to me, again, especially in their early years, being available and not being on the road or not being so consumed with work was really important. Now, that being said, I'm super ambitious. And so it wasn't like I
Yeah.
cruised in my career, but I did make sure that I was in an environment with, who I worked for and the scope of my role and just the requirements of my role that I could make their little award time at school or their dance recital or that sort of thing. So those, and then once I got into private equity, it was kind of game on. When
Yeah.
it came to,
Imagine.
yeah. So, and certainly that I didn't go into that, naively. I knew what I was signing up for. And so at that time, I actually had hired a live-in nanny and really, again, made some decisions that enabled me to feel good, or at least pretty good with what I was going to go venture to do. Ultimately, it was the right choice for me career-wise. But, as a mom, you're like, am I making the right decision? Are my
Yeah,
kids going to hate me for
always.
this? And what if they wake up in the middle of the night and I'm not there? Again, they survive. And quite frankly, my older daughter told me when she went to college, she was like, a lot of kids struggled because their moms had done or their dads had done so much for them. And she's like, you didn't always do that for us. So me jumping into college was not as life changing. And she said it with, a bit of humor.
Backhanded compliment.
Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, sorry. But again, you make choices and there's consequences. And so sometimes it's more on the side of family, sometimes it's more on the side of career. And as long as you're kind of very realistic with yourself on the pros and cons, you make relatively good decisions.
Definitely. It's interesting you brought that up when I was interviewing another female executive who was kind of in the midst of fundraising and always traveling. She had a bit younger kids, but really feels like they developed kind of some skill sets that made them a bit more independent and able to kind of like self-play at an earlier age, almost as a result of her busy schedule, which
Totally.
I think made a lot of sense.
Well, I think you set a good example as well. Just some days I chose to be a better mom, less good worker or employee. And other days you choose to be like that, really dedicated employee, worker, team member. And, those two often don't intersect. And so some days my kids saw that I had to prioritize work for whatever reason. And I mean, they survived, but they did see when they really needed me, they could count on me to be there.
Yeah. And I love that. When we chatted earlier, that stood out to me. You mentioned some days I'm a better mom, some days a better employee, which again, like after interviewing so many female execs, very similar sentiment. Do you have any kind of like advice or words of wisdom for newer moms who are still kind of struggling to even accept that reality that I think a lot of times we put pressure on ourselves to show up perfectly in both roles. So any advice that would just kind of ease that expectation?
Yeah, I think one is don't beat up on yourself. Everyone goes through those sort of struggles. If you're in a ambitious career and you've got children and needs at the home, and I mean, there's others that have even needs when it comes to their parents and taking care of, elderly family members. But ultimately, it's get rid of the guilt. Like, again, just
Yeah.
accept, some days I'd end the day and go, oh man, I was not that good of a mom. Like, but you just can't dwell on it. It's like, but I had a deadline or I had to fly to such and such city. Other days you go, wow, I was there for my kids and, and maybe I let some things slide at work and it's okay. It all shakes out. I think it's having that awareness again. And it took me a while because I lived in a world, I grew up Catholic. So I like have guilt in my DNA, which is bad. But so it took me a while to like let go of this. But the other thing, especially, is seeing how resilient kids are. I mean, they're not to be coddled. And, my kids often make fun of me because I was like the suck it up mom. Like, guys, suck it up. Like, let's go and quit dwelling on whatever it is that you're dwelling on. But again, I think it builds resilience. And, studies have shown resilience is like one of the keys to success. So,
Yeah.
and it's something that does need to be appreciated more just in general. But yeah, just don't beat yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great advice. And it's not seeing something as you're 50% here and 50% there. I think you said it perfectly. Some days you just have to give more to this role. Other days you're going to overcompensate and make it up in this area. So lots of gray is kind of the theme here.
Exactly. And just suck it up.
Yeah, suck it up too. Get over it.
Exactly.
And then kind of thinking over the years as looking back to when your daughters were younger, what would you say were some of the biggest challenges at that time when it came to balancing a family, career life, and how have those challenges evolved as your daughters got older over the years?
Well, first of all, I thought I had this naive perception that when my kids hit a certain age, like it would get so much easier. And it actually, early days are hard. Like, young babies, toddlers, just they're totally relying on you.
Yeah.
And then I feel like, so that's a lot. And I mean, that's lack of sleep and that's just the
Yeah,
demand.
it's my world right now.
Yes. Having little itty bitties. And then my experience is like, there's a point which it does get a bit easier. Like they're kind of older, more, they're still, I mean, they're still obviously needing you, but it's a little easier from just a scheduling standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But then what kicks in is I want to spend more time with them just to play, to be there and present. Mm-hmm. And I think the tough thing there is getting away from my phone and getting away from my computer and really, really being present, because that's when they want to play with you and like actually, pay attention to mom and desire our time. And then the teenage years come and then other,
bigger emotions, bigger problems.
And I would say in that phase, they certainly don't want to spend a ton of time with their mom, but that's where I felt like I had to be more just aware of who they were hanging out with, what was really going on, what was their underlying like emotional state, things that they wouldn't actually share, but I needed to pick up on. And so that was the tough part with me taking this very challenging travel demanding role, is that I wasn't always there. So it was kind of relying on some friends and making sure that, I just was there when I was needed. And it wasn't necessarily when they asked me to be, but it was there when they actually needed me and didn't know that they needed me. And then, I mean, now they're out of the house but I love the friendships that we have and it's a totally different kind of relationship, but you still worry. I mean, I still stress out I still track them to make sure that they're at their apartments at night.
I love that. That doesn't go away.
It never ends. But yeah, I thought at some point in time, kind of my mothering is done and I will just focus on me. And no, it
doesn't exist.
Which is good. Yeah.
And, how over the years, I mean, you travel, the private equity is so intense, mothering two daughters. What were some of the strategies or practices you think were most effective in helping you, I don't even want to say thrive, but just kind of keep everything above water and manage everything on your plate?
Again, I had some really good leaders that understood, in particular, that I was a single mom. And so if the school called, they knew I was going to leave a meeting early. And I think it's being transparent. And I just tended to share that up front so that I set a bit of boundary on, hey, I mean, I'm very dedicated to this role, but being a single mom may require that I, in some cases, drop some things. It's having that conversation with your leader and having the right kind of leader that is supportive of that. Again, I was fortunate to have that. And I don't think people always have that. So yeah, in some cases, it also was because I had to attend this school thing. Maybe it is putting in a longer night or working over consecutive weekends or what have you. So it is some give and take. And, in some cases, it means a bit of a social life suffers, but I looked at my kids as my social life to a certain extent.
Hmm.
So, again, if you have to come to a state in your head where it all balances out, it may not be the same level of balance for everyone. I think in some cases, some years I was definitely more mom than
Hmm.
great worker. And then other years I put my career in front of some other things. So yeah, I mean, you just have to kind of balance it all out.
And I love that because I think it shows it's fluid. There's seasons of life where you have to be more mom, just
Yeah.
the season of your kid's life, but that doesn't mean you can't then come back and be more dedicated and engaged at work. And I think that's what's hard. We can look at it very black and white and think, oh, if I'm not as engaged or I have to pop out earlier for pediatrician appointments, that kind of puts me off course when in reality, it sounds like that's not true.
Well, and again, if I spent a lot of time worrying about the perceptions of others that I left work early that day,
Yeah.
or, and I wasn't in this meeting, or I wasn't there in person because I couldn't travel, like, again, you could drive yourself nuts. And I
Right.
think that's where, like, just
Yeah.
stop, make the decision and just don't look back and don't overanalyze. I mean, because you made that decision that's right for you may not
Hmm.
be the same one others make. The other key thing was, and I certainly needed to do this as a single mom, but simplify your life. Like, I mean, everything I could do to just simplify my existence, like outsourcing
That
or
helps.
just
Yeah.
as opposed to having, and this is a silly one, but like a bunch of incoming mail and all kinds of things that are just not very important at the end of the day, just kind of cut all that out. And as much as you can simplify your life so that you can focus on what's really important,
Yeah.
I think that's a key.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
And then you kind of touched on this, like having good managers, understanding leaders is always a huge piece of this. But any other kind of family-friendly benefits or policies that you've had, either at your current company or past companies, where you felt, yes, like this is really supporting me as a working mom, or even when you're a single mom, anything that stands out?
I mean, flexibility is the main one.
Hmm.
And I will say I've had it, and I think there's mixed opinions on this nowadays, but the ability to, in some cases, work from home if I had a sick child. I am a proponent of in office work, but there are days where, that sick child can't go anywhere and you've got to stay home. And so
Hmm.
just the flexibility in time and where I do my work. I know personally, sometimes I get my best work done at night. And so also like allowing flexibility, allowing the work that your team members do to fit their work style,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. Because again, sometimes I work best at like just odd hours,
Yeah.
solving problems in my head once my head is clear and my kids are in bed. And I think just having an environment that you work in that affords that. And, just having a healthy culture that you're a part of, a supportive one, makes sense.
Hmm.
Again, it's also not allowing guilt to take over and you to stress out too much about making decisions that aren't always the right decision for others.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a great point. And then as a mom, how has that influenced how you show up both as an executive and even just a people leader, people manager?
Well, I do think that men and women lead differently. And it's very stereotypical, of course, to even say that. But I do think there are differences in, and that's where it's great to have a mixture of both.
Yeah.
And again, I can't speak for all women, but I think I do have almost like I like to mentor into almost not in a mothering way by any means, but I do like to see my team members grow and challenge them. And I mean, I equate that to kind of my kids where I have very much tough love and suck it up, but it's all You know, I tell them it's all because I love them and I want them to do their best. And
Yeah.
similarly, like for the people that work for me and work with me, I want the best for them. So I think it's bringing that like suck it up, get going, but also with that challenger mindset to make sure that they can meet their potential. And so, yeah, again, I don't know that that's unique to me or women, but I do bring that. And I find myself, you know, especially there's a point in my life where there's a book called Halftime, which talks about the first part of your career is a lot about consuming kind of experiences and you're building a nest egg because you want to send your kids to college. But the second half is about giving back. And in my head, I'm in that phase where I want to, and why I'm doing this podcast. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm hoping that someone listens to this and stops feeling guilty.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, it's just, I do want to leave the people that I work with on a good footing and hopefully having been challenged, but yet also feeling like I care.
Yeah.
Because I do.
That's a good challenger. I need to, my 5-year-old, when I try to be hard, but in her best interest, she always says, "You're being so mean." But I need to start using the word, "No, I'm challenging you." I'm not being mean.
My kids still give me grief over that. They're like, stop it. Actually, my older one, I always have this like, suck it up. Come on, let's go. And she goes, Mom, sometimes I just want a hug. I was like, oh, okay, good. Right, come over here. Let me give you a hug.
Executive
And then let's go. And they've also called me out. Sometimes another lesson that I hope others take from this is I'll come home from work and I was still in work mode. I'm like, do with them. And they would be like, Mom, we're not your employees. I'm like, oh, you're not? Okay. All right. I'll change that tone. All right. But again, I've had kudos to them for calling me out because they were right. I was treating them like little soldiers that needed to listen to me, which they do. I mean, they still do, but they don't always agree with that.
Yeah. No, I love that story.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, you've been amazing. And
stop it.
No, you haven't. And the humor and just the realness. But before we let you go, what would be like the one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to have from the show today?
Oh, goodness.
Or you can do two.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, just stop feeling guilty. And the second one would be, it's not work-life balance, it's work-life integration. And it's okay to be a good mom one day and then a really great exec one day, and never the two shall meet sometimes. So, but that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. I love that. That's a theme that's come out so much. Balance does not exist. It's integration, it's rhythm, it's any other word except balance.
Well, and the last thing I'll say, I know you asked for two, but I'm giving you three, is just like, look at it as a journey. I consciously made choices not to take roles or not to do things, but that was the right choice for that year. But then, game on another year, but it all kind of evens out, and just enjoy the journey. That's a overused phrase, but it's true.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here.
And thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Yes, this was fun. And thank you guys for listening. Tune in next time for more insights on how to build a successful career and raise a family.